Good afternoon. This is lesson 99, and we are going to be talking about adding and subtracting decimals. Now, we have already kind of done this together in class, so it should be pretty easy and just serve as a reminder. Adding and subtracting decimals. Now, before I go any further, I should be able to say, what do you do with them? And you give me 3 words, and I'll see if you remember what they are. When you add or subtract decimals, you will line them up. Now, that is just a very, very important reminder. Line them up. You'll want to make sure that you've always got them lined up, decimals, one right after the other. Now, tomorrow when we talk about simplifying decimals, that's getting rid of the extra zeros, you can also annex zeros, which means putting on extra zeros. So we're going to look at a little bit with that today. So let's do a couple practice ones together. Let's do just a very simple one. If we have 4 3/10 plus 2. Now, you should be able to tell me, there's your decimal in the first one because it's visible. Without even thinking, you should be able to tell me where the decimal is with the 2. Write it in. And hopefully you put it right there. Now, what that means is I have done my job of lining up my decimals. Now, because I've got this empty space right there, I am going to annex a decimal. That means adding one in just to keep everything lined up. So I'm going to annex my decimal, and then I'm going to go ahead and add 3 plus 0 is 3, 4 plus 2 is 6, and my decimal, if you will notice, comes right down. So, 6 3/10 is your answer. So, that's what we mean when we're adding and subtracting decimals and whole numbers, is you just have to know where the decimal is with that whole number. Now, the same thing would work when you are subtracting decimals and whole numbers. If I have, let's do 12 4/10 minus 5. Where's your decimal with your 5? Without a thought, you should have gone right there. You have indeed then lined up your decimal. Now, by the way, lining up your decimal means every other number is going to be lined up as well. That is why it's very smart for me to say, I'm going to annex in my 0. That keeps everything lined up. Then I'm going to do a straight out subtraction problem. 4 minus 0 is 4. 2 minus 5 I can't do, so I will borrow. 12 minus 5 is 7. Bringing straight down my decimal because it's lined up. So I have 7 4/10. So, should make sense. Always when you add and subtract with decimals, line them up. Annexing a 0 is adding in a 0 when you need it to keep things lined up. Now let's take a look at just one final thing, because this is kind of going into lesson 100 that we have already looked at. But if I were to have 2 73/100 plus 1 and 27 hundredths. I would say 3 plus 7 is 10. Carry the 1. 7 plus 2 is 9, plus 1 is 10. Carry the 1. 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 1 is 4. My decimals are lined up, which help me know that right there is my decimal place. Now, if I was going to write that answer and I wanted it simplified, what would I write as my final answer? Hopefully you would say, oh, Mrs. Gomes, all I need to write is the 4. Because remember, at this point, you do not need those zeros at the end. Get rid of any extra zeros that you can. Let's take a look at the one more step with this that means the exactly the same thing. If I were to say 2 and 73 hundredths plus 1 and 2 sevenths. Now let's change that. Let's make that 1 and 17 hundredths. Now, when we add this one up, we go 3 plus 7 is 0. 7 plus 1 is 8. 2 plus 1 is 3. My decimals are lined up and come straight down. Now here, what would you write as your final answer? Hopefully, if you are paying attention, you would have written 3 and 8 tenths as final answer because I do not need that extra 0. Annexing zeros is when you add them. Usually you will do that with addition or subtraction. But when I simplify a decimal, I'm going to get rid of any extra zeros. Kind of like getting rid of the evil leading 0. It just happens to be at the end. So make sure you can always simplify. If given the chance, choose to simplify. Annex, add on zeros anytime you need to, and always, always, always remember when you add and subtract decimals, make sure that you use the rule of lining them up. Adding and subtracting decimals, you line them up. Have a wonderful night.